episode 500 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Chris Winburn,
Andrew Swafford, Michael O'Malley.
And today we're going to be talking about the Grand Budapest Hotel. Thank you all for sticking with us. So this has been part of the last series that we've been doing. It's been called Cinematary Redo. We've been rewatching a lot of movies from, the first episode to 499. This one was the 8th episode we ever did. So early on in the podcast, we didn't really know what we wanted to do. Like, we wanted to talk about movies, but we didn't know like how we wanted to talk about them. And so we did a lot of episodes where it was like the films of Alfred Hitchcock or the films of Hayao Miyazaki. And it's broad and just kind of, because we were just kind of naming movies that we liked by them. It wasn't really conversation. And so we did a lot of those. And then for the 8th episode, we settled on, Grand Budapest Hotel had come out a couple weeks ago. As cinephiles in college around the time of this, like, we were naturally inclined to see a Wes Anderson movie, and we're very excited about it. And so this was our first episode that was like full scale, one movie. And so through this series, I've been pulling clips from it. So I'm not going to say anything at the initial part of this. I'm going to play a clip of Zach in 2014 talking about the Grand Budapest Hotel. I really felt like this was actually one of his more sad efforts, because sad is that's not like bad, like sad, you're like the feelings, the emotion. Yeah, sorry, I phrased that horribly. Because while everything was so, it's kind of fun to watch because everything was so chipper, and you had Ray Fiennes and he's just like, throwing out different lines and you're cracking up. But there was this kind of this other layer that we never really touched, because you really never learned anything about Ray Fiennes, where he came from, kind of why he is the way he is, which was fine. I don't think it needed to be addressed, but at the same time, there was like this kind of ominous, sad layer that just kind of hung over the entire movie the whole time, and it was really kind of interesting. It reminded me, sadness-wise, of the Royal Tenenbaums. I don't think it got as dark as that movie, but it was definitely had a sad undertone. But at the same time, it was just a beautiful movie, and I loved how he created and crafted these characters. And Ray Fiennes, easily with a kind of Peter Sellers-esque performance, really stole the show, and is one of his better characters for sure. Thought it was sad.
Not as dark as the Royal Tenenbaums.
No, it wasn't. I also, fascism's pretty been listening back to those. I say interesting so much. Grace, what's been your relationship with Wes Anderson?
My relationship with Wes Anderson started with Moonrise Kingdom. I went on what I thought was a date with an older boy in high school. My parents are in the audience, so I'm confessing this to them. I thought it was a date. It wasn't. We saw Moonrise Kingdom, and I was immediately blown away. I think that we checked out, or we rented Fantastic Mr. Fox from Blockbuster when it was going out of business nearby our house. So just always kind of picking up on him and always being like very drawn to his work and to his films. And then it's always just been something that I've returned to. And I think that I look at him as the start of my own film and visual aesthetics. I started to develop my own tastes via him. And he is one that, Andrew, I'm going to quote you. You had said that he puts the technique to the forefront. So that's, you're immediately able to, interact with technique and skills and aestheticism, as just a regular person, not even as a real cinephile or as a director or as an artist or anything. You just are immediately struck by the real beauty of it all. But I've stayed a loyal devotee of his. I own all of his DVDs, and I just adore him. There's so much that he's able to convey. There's a lot of hurt in this. There's war. There's fascism in something like Darjeeling Unlimited. There's the loss of the patriarch in Royal Tenenbaums as well, loss of the patriarch, and legacy, memory, life, death, romance, comedy. I mean, he can do everything, and he does it all so well balanced.
Absolutely. Andrew, you weren't on episode 8, unfortunately, so I need to get the pull a clip for you. What watching it today, what is Grand Budapest like for you?
I like it a lot. It's a great movie. My favorite Wes Anderson is probably always going to be Fantastic Mr. Fox. Partially for nostalgic reasons, but also because like he's always kind of trying to make animated movies with so custom real actors. But I think that you could make a very strong argument this is his best movie. It feels like kind of the pinnacle of this ever evolving, increasingly aesthetic style that he's now known for. And you can also kind of see the beginnings of sort of the period that he's in right now, where he's really interested in frame stories and kind of unconventional narrative structure. You just kind of get that like on the edges of this movie. But no, I think it's fantastic. Definitely one of his funniest movies, as well as one of his saddest. And yeah, but the script is amazing. All the editing and the kind of camera trickery that he does to punctuate jokes and things like that is all done incredibly well. It kind of flies by too.
It really does.
Yeah. I have kind of mixed feelings about the fascism stuff that I imagine we'll get into. We don't have to talk about that right now.
Yeah, don't worry. It's on the docket. Michael, what about you and Wes Anderson?
I think actually I'm pretty similar to Grace, except Fantastic Mr. Fox is first rented from Blockbuster. Probably the only one of his that would have flown as like family movie night at my house. But it was like a whole family thing and we all enjoyed it. And then sometime later I connected the dots that like, oh, this is a guy who has like, a broader filmography. And I think I went back to like Royal Tenenbaums. And then by that time, Moonrise Kingdom had come out. So kind of that trajectory. And I do think like now, like I saw this movie in the theater at Downtown West. I don't know if anyone remembers when Downtown West used to do that little stinger thing at the beginning of their movies where it was like stories matter here, and it was a Wes Anderson style like little thing. And I remember that playing before this, and oh, okay, I see what you guys are doing. But and then I think I rented it again after I watched it in theater. But this is my first time in probably 10 years seeing this, and in the intervening time, like Andrew mentioned, like Wes Anderson has like. This feels like in some ways an inflection point in his filmography, not just for the like the frame stories and that sort of thing, but like he's really, really, really burrowed into this whole like I'm going to inhabit all the media of the mid-century, and kind of he's always been like that kind of like nostalgist about like a particular style of like mid-century modernist aesthetic, but like with this one where you have like the recreation of like bygone institutions, like that feels like brace in line with like French Dispatch and like to a certain extent maybe Asteroid City or things like that. And so it's like interesting to see it in that context. Like I think when I saw this one, I thought like, wow, this is his most intricate movie. Like I love that. And now I can see him having made like more like intricate movies and seeing this as kind of like the beginning of that trend. It was interesting.
We talked a little bit about it, but Ray Fiennes is still for me like this is my favorite performance of his.
I think so. Yeah.
It's because he had this, up to this point, like he's known for mainly like playing like just a real evil villain. He's the main Nazi in Schindler's List. He's Voldemort. He's all of these different things that like are just like spewing evil. And this one is such a light, charismatic. Really, really funny role, which seems a little bit off path from what we're used to seeing of him. What are y'all's impressions of him?
He's such a great character. And also, like, are we supposed to think he's kind of playing Wes Anderson or some version of Wes Anderson that's being kind of like self-critical or something like that?
Maybe. I don't know if he's as like Woody Allen as that, but yeah.
I mean, he's good.
I really like it. I mean, you kind of did this in the 2014 episode, but like he toes a really incredible line between like being like really like almost everything he says is comedic on some level, but that like moment by moment comedy like builds that like underlying tragedy, and kind of building up to like the kind of you snap out of the flashback and they're like, well, they shot him, of course, like in that, like it doesn't feel like a comedic character has been killed off at that point. And I think that's like a real testament to Ray Fiennes' performance, is that despite being funny the entire time, through like the prison break and like through everything else, like
it's sad not because he's not funny anymore when he's dead. You know, it's sad because it's a human being.
The particular way which is funny is just fantastic. Like, it's always these really sharp tonal shifts between him reciting nonsense romantic poetry and then just like unloading a string of profanity towards someone, right? There's such dynamics in this performance.
Right. Well, and there's that line by like at the end when, you know, he's basically like, you know, performing this facade of like this old world that like is already basically gone. And I feel like those sort of moments where he's like, you know, pulling, you know, out the verse, but then it's like interrupted with like the necessity of the moment that like their situation requires. Like that's kind of like an embodiment of that whole thing.
Yeah. Overall, like there's just this, I think Wes Anderson does a great job at this, of just like creating this nostalgia, you know, like I was thinking a lot about like places that have this peak time, you know, there you have memories around it. You remember going to them. You remember, you know, meeting people and all the things are attached to this like space. And then time withers it away. Outside factors wither it away. And the Grand Budapest Hotel is like this opulent space, you know, that he kind of upkeeps that. It feels almost out of time. And then it's taken over, and then it starts to decline. And even though at its last state that you see it in, it's very far from what you saw before, there's still something about it kind of hanging on, and it's tough to like let those places go just because there's these kind of ghosts of time that linger there.
I will say, as an aside, like incredible you know, use of color to just indicate when exactly, you know, it gets painted orange. Like you don't need it. You don't need the date like to be explained to you like when you see like what that place looks like, as opposed to like the flashback.
Yeah, Grace.
And I just think that these spaces serve to insulate and protect them from the world around them. I was thinking about Gustav and how he is this perfect gentleman, and then his ignorance and the you know, sort of hateful vitriol, like the bigotry where he lays into Zero for, you know, not bringing all of these accoutrements to help them escape. But you see the other side of this class system that he sort of falls into or like protects or, you know, attaches himself to via the Grand Budapest Hotel. And he, you know, says very hateful things about immigrants coming to this well-developed, beautiful country. That's not how he's, you know, this civilized. He's high society. He's civilized. And when confronted with the harsh reality, they're outside of prison, they're outside of the hotel. You realize how small-minded he is and how the world is so much bigger than just the Grand Budapest. And then when the soldiers take over the Grand Budapest as army barracks, the world has infiltrated, has, you know, breached the walls that this hotel provides, the safety and security of high society, tucked away on the, you know, highest mountain, you know, completely inaccessible.
It's also interesting, you know, you say that he like has these kind of ignorant views toward immigrant, because he's somebody who I think also has come from absolutely nothing, just like worked his way up. And so it's that whole thing of like, you know, well, I did it this way and you're supposed to follow this path. And because of all of these other political circumstances, like Zero wasn't really offered that path you to take. So it's him kind of also recognizing the world's changing around him.
And it's Zero's story about being a refugee, escaping like a war-torn country that makes him decide to apologize pretty effusively for that bigoted rant. In the moment, it doesn't necessarily feel like enough, right? Like, is it just because he's a refugee that you are willing to kind of walk back that awful statement about immigrants? Would you not say the same thing if, you know, the situation was different? But of course, we also have him allowing himself to be killed, you know, to defend Zero by the end of the movie. So I think we are supposed to think he's a sympathetic character despite his, you know, imperfect views.
So that's kind of like, I mean, the old world that he represents, I mean, it's not an accident that becomes just the barrack for the fascists, right? Because like the old world is what births like fascism. And so like the seeds of like what the fascist takeover are like already embedded in that old world. And so there's like that contradiction there that he's always navigating between like, the class stratification and like the, high culture or whatever, like becomes what is like part of like the aesthetic of the fascists. Although obviously there's like a crudeness to the fascists, as well as they bring in like all the banners with the not swastika.
He thinks their outfits are drab.
Yeah, but like in terms of like, I mean, they're all like the industrialists and stuff like that, who like, patronized the hotel, and like some of them didn't, right? Like some of them got killed by them. But, I feel like that contradiction is within his character because it's within what he is trying to do his body.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of why I feel somewhat mixed feelings about the political commentary here. Cause like, one of his biggest critiques of fascism is that it's quote unquote uncivilized, right? It doesn't have taste for art and beauty and delicacy and things like that. And, to a certain extent, that's true, right? Like fascism in today's world is like attempting to ban books and, refuse to engage with art on kind of like a deeper level. But also, like a lot of those things that Gustav considers to be civilized or fine are kind of rooted in elitism, like Eurocentric standards and colonialism and things like that, right? So, yeah, just as you were saying, like it's inherent to his character.
I remember something that people said about Wes Anderson is, they were mad that he didn't like make them Nazis, like they were this kind of fascist state that wasn't like actual Nazis, and that was
this is two Z's. Like, yeah. Can you get any closer to the Nazis with that?
I'm here to say, almost 10 years later, that's a stupid argument.
I don't know. I would have never guessed that these guys were Nazis. I'm helping you out here. I don't always blow my mind right.
It's interesting. I think the thing I was thinking a lot about is you have the kind of first version of the kind of fascist state, and there's still like a sense of decorum to it. You have Edward Norton, and he's you have this kind of person to person level where he recognizes Gustav, and even though there's like this danger, there still feels a bit of like this kind of storybookness to it. Like, you're like, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. The good guys are going to get away. Like, it's going to be fine. And that's what makes the ending so stark, is that it goes black and white. You get this second round of fascist, and they don't have that. It's gotten darker. It's gotten more brutalized. And, it's something that, especially not that, the first wave of the presidency was anything like calm, yep. But it seems like the wave we're in right now is very much the brutal zone. Like there's no confectionery to it.
No Mendel's, no confectionery.
No. I was trying to make that connection. This is a bit of a surface level question after we just got really deep into fascism, which is a great topic. That's, you go to a bar, a lot of people go, "Hey, how did the balls win?" I go, "No, let's talk about fascism." It's a great table starter. And but one of the things we've talked a little bit about how entertaining this movie is. What are some of your favorite moments? I was thinking now, I know he's in the movie, but the fact that they have a bald, shirtless Harvey Keitel showing up as a rare boot to be a gangster is like just ostensibly funny.
Keeping the same accent too. Like everyone else is doing these like German-esque like things, and
he rolled off the street, ostensibly funny. But also the funniest part of the movie to me is when Jeff Goldblum enters the museum and it says 15 minutes and it's on the little like switch card thing. And then Willem Dafoe comes in and it switched from 15 to 14 because somebody had to get up and like switch that card between Jeff Goldblum entering the building and Willem Dafoe entering the building. Just no notes.
Two moments come to mind. One is she's been murdered and you think I did it. And he just runs directly into the back of the shot. And then also the moment where Jeff Goldblum's character gets his fingers chopped off in the door. Just like a perfect balance of the ridiculous comedy of this movie and the like actual, dark tone and actual stakes that involve.
I really enjoy at the initial reading of the will, and Adrian Brody is so mean and calls Mr. Gustav the F slur, and that's not the funny part. And then I'm not laughing at that sometimes, but then
Nazis are homophobic, though.
but so it makes sense. And when he calls him a fruit, and then he just kind of stomps his face like, how's that supposed to make me feel? That is hysterical every time. His feelings are really burnt in that moment. And how is he supposed to react to that? Who does that?
Yeah. I think like one of my favorites. So like there's like a kind of setup, and then the setup feels like the joke, but then the actual joke is later on when they replace the apple painting with like the erotic paintings. And that at first feels funny, but the real joke is later on, and then they don't notice until like they like look up and they're like, wait, where did that come from? And like it's so funny. And the sister's like, oh, I do it. Yeah, I do.
Well, yeah, that's the fascism. They don't recognize, one piece of art from the next.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go into the audience. Who was this? Is your first time seeing Grand Budapest? Decent amount. All right, cool. I don't know how we'll make this happen. We definitely want to take some, like, whether it's thoughts or questions or whatever. We're here to answer anything. Anybody have any questions, statements, anything they want to make? Yeah, go ahead.
There were some lines in your movie that really resonated for the time we're in now, when he talked about, you can arrest an immigrant for no crime. That just hit me. Wow. I mean, I saw this movie when it first came out, and now I'm seeing it again in a totally different cop. And then there was another line in the movie that made me think that what we read out.
Yeah. Feels much more prescient now than it did in 2014.
I'm wondering what inspired Wes Anderson to tell that story in 2014.
Yeah.
When, this kind of reality felt much further off, right?
I mean, to be honest, I think it is his interest in like the mid-century, right? Because like the fascism, the fascist takeover of Europe, and then the kind of, at the very end, I think they allude to the Soviets having taken over the country, right? Like, is that what they mean by it becoming a like common property? But like, that reshapes like the entirety of like Europe. And if you're interested in like telling a European story from like that kind of period of time that he's always drawing from, like it feels inescapable to, not have to deal with that.
Anything else?
There was also a reference to the rule of law. Somebody actually said the phrase in the movie, the rule of law. And that's something you hear all the time now.
Yeah.
And the fascists in this movie are somewhat legalistic, right? Like Edward Norton's character cares about the second will, right? And like you said, eventually they rip up that card that they give to Zero, and you start to see that fade away. But there is something maybe a little bit naive about the idea that fascists care about the rule of law, at least for a little while.
You had a question in the back?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've seen this movie, I feel like, a billion times. I loved it dearly. I even watched it earlier this year. But something I noticed only this time is that the only time they ever finish deciding a poem is before Gustav dies. And I thought that was really interesting as kind of what you guys are talking about, but also as this way of they're just like, he does this all the time. He likes to recite poetry. And then there's this like early instance where they actually in the movie go, we're just going to take a second and let it read out.
It's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
It's really important that it's Agatha. I mean, she exists completely outside of this, and she's not of either world. She's not of the hotel. She's not wealthy. She's not fascist. She's this like beacon of purity that Gustav calls her that, outright. It's because of her purity. And I think that they afford her real respect, and they cherish her presence and her insight into their relationship, and she's able to comment on the relationship between Gustav and Zero in a way that other people they don't get to witness that up close.
I'm curious what y'all think about the role of Agatha in the movie, because like me and Darren were talking at dinner earlier, like about Wes Anderson's kind of general disinterest in women, and she's like very much in the margins of the story. We really only see her through Zero's eyes, and that line about her purity being what he values about her, like you could imagine a fascist saying that too, right?
Well, but I mean, they're not so pure. I mean, they're like making out and, you know, tearing each other's clothes off in the movie theater. So, I mean, she's in her nightgown, they're sharing a bed together and they're sneaking around. She's obviously not, it's not the purity of like her virtue. I think it's more of like her purity of or like clarity, more like clarity of purpose, her, you know, unwavering bravery in the face of conspiracy and threats of death and murder. I mean, she's unwavering in her bravery, and I think it's more like that. I disagree with the conversation that you guys had about how Wes Anderson doesn't care for women. I'll just say that. But
what do you think is his best female character?
Is it his if I say Meryl Streep as, you know, Mrs. Fox and Fantastic?
Yes, other cousin, yeah.
Yeah.
I had actually remembered Agatha having much more of a prominent role in this movie. I think maybe because she figures so much into the climax. And I was watching this movie, I was like, man, I don't really remember Saoirse Ronan being in this more. And I actually was kind of struck by that. Like, I think, you know, I don't have thoughts on like Wes Anderson and gender in general, but she was a much more marginal character than I remembered until like the very end. And like, you know, she gets kind of like, you know, summarily killed off as well by a disease, you know, which like doesn't like, it's like sad because you're sad for Zero more than like you're sad for her, which is like in contrast to when Ray Fiennes' character dies, you know, which you're sad because you're attached to him, or at least that was my feelings of it when like revisiting it. So yeah.
Anything else for the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
I guess one thing that kind of stuck out to me with Agatha, this is my first time seeing it, but there was this shot of her looking out up the roof and you just see her head, and then it jumps immediately to the idea that the head is Kiba. And yet that's a different woman. And it took me a minute, honestly, to realize that they were talking about a different woman because they brought that up earlier. I don't know what kind of connection they were trying to...
Oh, it's just Wes Anderson playing a dirty chick. All right.
He's sneaky like that. Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, I guess maybe another thought on that. She does have a lot of like close-ups on her face. I was thinking about them on the merry-go-round and then where she's lit from behind, and it's beautiful. That scene makes me tear up. The like tenderness in her eyes and like the softness in her face and her looking with like such true love from Z to A. Their romance is so beautiful to me, and it feels rushed, but I mean, it's war. You know, what choice do they have? They don't really get to have a long courtship, and there's nobody around them to really tell them, you know, this is how you behave in, you know, normal relationships. They see each other, they love each other, they have no one else. Why can't they love each other so quickly? But yeah, she's shown in a lot of, you know, close-ups, or at least two, you know, important shots of her character in that very close, you know, tight framing. So it is sneaky, and he plays that dirty trick on you, and you think it's her, and it's devastating in that moment. And then you're like, oh, thank God, somebody else is dead.
The club-footed sister. It's almost like a little bit of like a play on. It's like a more mature version of the couple on Moonrise Kingdom who are both kids. This one's almost a little bit like, I have a little bit more life experience, but still kind of this still like almost distanced romance to a degree, because you never really get to spend a lot of time with them in it.
It's also partially due to the frame narrative, right, where we're getting the author telling Zero as an adult, telling his story as a child, and it's too painful. Being read in a book, yeah, and it's too painful for him to recount, so he just decides to kind of leave that part out, right?
Yep. Any final lingering thoughts on Grand Budapest that we didn't get to?
Music, great music.
Oh yes, yeah, music, yeah.
My favorite part with the music is when they go into the monastery and the monks are chanting in a way that sits with the score. Like, I think that's just a great little touch.
I also like the when Jeff Goldblum's being stalked by Willem Dafoe's character. It's just like the brushes, the like a really, really light percussion. It's great.
That whole scene is torn curtain. Yeah. I mean, yeah. But somebody has some more thoughts. One thought.
It's okay. Surface level. It's not too deep, but I think it's awesome. Ownership fish off with
In the middle of reciting of romantic poetry. Yeah.
Well, it's such a sudden, it's just such a sudden death, which honestly, a lot of the deaths in the movie are very just like quick. So it makes it just funnier. Go ahead.
Just on the topic of music and art, I wanted to say I love the miniatures in this. Yeah, so many good little sets. I mean, the first introduction of the Grand Budapest Hotel is like matte painting background and the funicular, this tiny little model, and then the hotel itself. I think there's also a shot of like cobblestone street with Mendel's that seems like could be a miniature, and the bike is superimposed, but the skiing scene is an excellent use. And I feel like it fits so well with the sort of storybook framing that we see so much of this world through little miniatures and matte paintings. It's such a good use of his style.
I disagree. I think Willem Dafoe is that good at skiing. He just says
the miniatures make for it. Give it this animated quality. You had said it was kind of throwaway, but making animated movies with real actors and the little intercuts of these little dolls,
Little dioramas.
It's like a cartoon, and then Ray finds cartoonish quality.
Andrew, any final thoughts?
Not off the top of my head. All right. No.
Good movie.
Yeah, good movie. I like it.
Grace, what about you?
I'm so sad. Just devastatingly sad throughout. It really is heartbreaking. It's a lonely movie, but it's beautiful. I don't mean to get to Michael. We don't want to end on that, but it's supposed
to be fair, I did tell you that because we were trying to decide on what movie we would do for the 500th, and you were like, let's do Grand Budapest. I'm like, that's great, but it's a sad movie. And you're like, that's cute, but it's funny.
But it's as sad as one of the ones we were going to do, though.
No. That's true.
We were going to do Columbus by Koganada, which would not have the same draw, I don't think, but is a great sad movie about art.
I wanted to do Shrek Retold. All right. Yeah, I have to agree with my 2014 self. I think I hit the nail on the head. I was really good hitting points from back in the day. I really was proud of myself. But yeah, I do. To your point before, I think it's probably his most complete picture, and it very much feels like the kind of all-encompassing. If you're kind of if you can't get through this, the Wes Anderson is probably not for you. But if you can get through it, it's kind of I think it unlocks a lot of of their movies, especially his early movies. I mentioned Royal Tenenbaums before, that one I feel really opens up when you kind of think about this movie. And it's interesting also thinking about Asteroid City, his most recent movie, which very much is another kind of decoder ring for Wes Anderson. This one though feels like it's much more about his style than that one's more about his stories.
Yeah, it's this one's a movie about aesthetics, not just a movie with a lot of aesthetics.
All right, cool. Well, Nick, I think we're gonna swap over to the video. We're gonna watch a quick video from some of our other contributors, and then we're gonna go into a panel about the history of Cinematary. So, yeah, give us 7 minutes while we watch this.
It's raining. I'm in my car. I love Cinematary. They were the first podcast to ever dared to have Seth Schroeder on. That's me. They helped to make my mom proud by having me on a podcast. That's what she always dreamed of. And he continued to have my own podcast on Launchables. But the first one I was on was the European animation episode. The Dwight Mayer and Norstein, they did this crazy animals doing crazy stuff and being animated. But my favorite episode that I was a part of was, usually there's a bunch of people on an episode, or at least more than two. And this time it was just me and Zach
everybody else was sick or something, or had, God forbid, better things to do. I don't know. So it was just me and Zach talking about Shrek for an hour and a half, and being rather nonplussed by Shrek for an hour and a half. It's an epic. You should definitely listen to it. It's a lot like Stairway to Heaven. What do you eat, Cinematary?
Hi, this is Logan Canny. I used to work for Cinematary. It's a brilliant, brilliant place. I got so lucky in being reached out to by Andrew in late 2018 to see if I wanted to do any work. I'd never written like a professional review or a semi-professional review. I'd only done stuff on Letterboxd and on deleted blogs in high school. And because of the development and the freedom that I had at Cinematary, I was able to get other jobs in film criticism. And I used my film criticism, some of it at Cinematary, as part of my undergraduate at university. And I cited a review I wrote for Drive My Car as part of my master's degree application. So thank you, Cinematary, for everything you've done for my life.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ash Baker, and I'm here to congratulate the gang on 500 episodes of Cinematary. I joined the show through my association with UT Cinema Club way back in the day. I knew nothing about movies back then, but I did have opinions. This airplane was an articulate Yonis felt that I saw on the screen, and in turn, myself. For instance, I coped with my anger about sexism in movies by ruthlessly objectifying men. Check out the Mads Mikkelsen series. I chose to discover my own identity by watching queer history in movies and writing reviews for the website. My favorite review, though, is one that I wrote for my buddy Cam Watson and absolutely tears to shred the current vice president of the United States. Congrats, guys.
Sorry. Happy 500 episodes. My favorite memory, I have a few, but I think the one that has the most significance to me is I both wrote a review and did an episode on The Handmaiden, which is my favorite movie of all time. And it meant a lot to me to kind of just have a place where I could talk endlessly about how much it meant to me, and also had the excuse to do my research on it. And I don't really have the ability to retain details like I want to, but something about that entire process has it ingrained in my mind. So anytime someone wants to talk about that movie, I'm so down. I love it. Thank you, Cinematary, for all the memories.
Hello, Cinematary listeners and fans, and the rest of you who I assume thought you were going to a normal screening tonight. And I guess what the hell of a first episode to listen to. My name is Ree Ramsey, and I've been a contributor to Cinematary since back in 2017 when Zach and Andrew asked me to join for an episode about Personal Shopper and the Kristen Stewart Marathon. I have so many great memories from Cinematary, including TIFF in 2022, being blamed for Old being voted as the favorite movie of the website a few years ago. But I'll never forget when Zach launched his basketball movie series and we got together and gushed over High Flying Bird and realized our shared reverence for Steven Soderbergh. Anyways, I hope you all have an amazing night, and I really wish I was there. See ya.
Yo, what's up, Cinematary fans and fam? This is Cinematary OG Nadine Smith weighing in with a little late-breaking, last-minute message for you guys here on the sunny, beautiful streets of Crown Heights in Brooklyn, New York. I just want to say congrats on 500 episodes. I was on many of those episodes. I was not on nearly as many of those episodes as Zach or Andrew or some of the other folks in the family. But it is quite an accomplishment. There are a lot of podcasts, a lot of moody podcasts out there in the world that start with the grandest of ambitions and don't get very far. And I think part of the reason why Cinematary has endured is because at the end of the day, it was,
maybe a group of people who did not know each other as well in the very beginning, but who very quickly became friends, who really became a part of each other's lives. And this venture has, even beyond movies, I know, been such a sort of consistent grounding presence in all of our lives. And it's just really amazing to think about how many hours of conversation, how many movies we, watched together. Not necessarily always literally. I mean, literally in the case of this event right now. But it's just been such a privilege getting to know these people, to know their taste, and to see them grow, to see them develop and challenge themselves in terms of the movies they watch, in terms of how they view them. I think a lot of times over the years, actually some of the richest conversations we've had have been disagreements. I think about, it must have been 2017, 2018 now, where we did an episode about Jackass, and Andrew and Michael were not fans. I don't know if those perspectives have changed at all, but it was a better conversation for it. I remember years ago now programming like a Brian De Palma series, one of my favorite filmmakers, and nobody else was really vibing with it. But I think we're all the sum of our parts, and Cinematary is really a community, and I think that's why it's endured. I think that's why it will continue to endure. And I just want to say, really, congratulations. I'm proud of all of you guys so much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting.
You always sit 6 inches higher to begin. It's great. It's still a sensation. Yeah. So it was wonderful seeing Nadine in that last clip. It stole my thunder of my first question as a way of sort of like telling some of the history of Cinematary. I'll just say I remember the first conversation, like longer conversation I had with you guys, was about you were still at a stage where you were trying to figure out what you wanted Cinematary to be. And I don't know if this was good advice, but I remember encouraging you to like just think of it first of all as a time to get together with your friends. Don't be too quick to define it and like monetize it and all these things. And I'll tell you now, 10 years later, one of the reasons I was saying that is because I'm a little bit older, and I know that it's really hard to sustain your enthusiasm for projects like this. And so I didn't want you to like define it so quickly, because I wanted you to be able to escape it if you needed to. And so the first thing I just want to say is I just want to commend Zach in particular for producing this thing weekly for so many years, and then bi-weekly. But also I would just be curious. Some of us probably haven't heard the story of how you all met and how it started, but I guess maybe to me, a more interesting opening question is what has sustained it, especially when I know it must have felt like a job at times.
Yeah. The best way I can answer that is I'm just kind of a bit hard-headed, and I just want, like, the one thing about cinema, we have not made really any money. We've got to go to TIFF, and that's been such a blessing. But the thing about the podcast is the consistency. I'm like, we may not be the best podcast every week. We may not be the most innovative podcast of the week, but like we're gonna be consistent. And so if we're bad for 3 straight weeks, maybe that 4th week we'll get a little bit better. And I think that's just kind of how we kind of grew, because we did so many reps and reps and reps out. I don't think we really hit our stride until like close to the 100th episode, because it just required us not only getting used to the format and developing the format, but also like befriending each other. Because Andrew and I really didn't know each other. I had interviewed him and another founder of Cinematary, Dylan Moore. They ran ET Cinema Club at the campus, and I written an article about them. And then I got really into like podcasting to be a thing to do, and asked them to do a movie podcast. And the first episode is really awkward because we don't really know each other, and we don't really want to be like, oh, I like this movie, and be like, you're stupid, what are you talking about? And so, that consistency has allowed us to get better, but it has also allowed us to develop like a rapport and a friendship, whether it's the four of us here or even the people you saw in the video. We've developed that rapport with everybody that even if we're not as as highly researched as others, there's something about like, I'm going to get to hang out with Andrew this week. We get to hang out with Michael this week that I think is really the core of the podcast.
And I'm glad that you reminded me that was your advice, that we should think about it as an excuse to hang out with our friends, because I don't remember you saying that, but that is kind of the place that I also kind of arrived at as the reason to keep doing it. Because there were parts of the history of the podcast where we were not necessarily chasing money, but definitely chasing attention. In the days of film Twitter, I don't know if film Twitter still exists, but we were definitely addicted to film Twitter for a little while, and just like trying to constantly drive traffic to the site. We were trying to publish a lot of writing for a while. At one point, we were publishing 2 reviews a week, which was really when it felt like work. And I was the editor, and so I was kind of like having to poke people all the time of like, hey, will you write something for the site? Will you write something for the site? And I think it was when we stopped trying to do that, stopped trying to hustle so hard, that we really hit our stride. And it became just kind of a fun thing to do with my friends, right?
I'll also say that sustaining thing is just curiosity. Like, I think there's been like quite a bit of the podcast that was just like, for the time that I've been on, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in this. Like, I haven't seen this movie. I'd like to see this movie. So I'm going to sign up for this episode of the podcast so that I can see this movie because I'm curious about it. Or like, even like whole series where it's like, I don't know very much about, I don't know, pick a series and like, you might not have known about it and wanted to be on the series to know about it. And, that was part of like, what continued my engagement besides just having friends, is that like, I just thought it was interesting to watch movies. And the podcast was like an excuse to like watch movies and then think about it in a way rather than just like watching it at my house and then like forgetting about it later on. And like the Young Critics Watch Old Movie series every year, like the way that we structure those was having like we all submit like ballots, I guess, and then like talk about like which ones we're going to do. And at least for me, like I would always submit a mix of movies that I had already seen that like I was interested in talking with other people about, but also like movies that's like, well, I should get around to this movie because, I'm kind of curious what it's like, but I've never actually sat down and watched like, I don't know, The Godfather. I had, but like I can't think of another like iconic. Nadine's also a culprit of the Young Critics because she would just toss out, like she would be like, hey, there's this little known whatever film that like 6 people have watched, but it's the greatest film of all time. And then we would have to watch it and she wouldn't be on the episode. And so we watched some wild stuff. But yeah, I agree.
Grace, do you have any thoughts on it?
It's the promise of growth and then a space to take your passions and present them to other people who can either match them or take your passions to new heights. I never thought that I could do anything like this. I thought that I would just have this passion and fervor for film and that I would just hold on to it and it would just be mine and it would be so heavy on me and I needed somewhere and somebody to share it with. And I think that this space offers the opportunity to learn more, expand. It's your curiosity. It's the consistency. It really requires, dedication and diligence. That sounds all, maybe a little negative, but having a consistent place to share, a consistent hangout with your friends to talk and sharing expressions and emotions. There's also, there's a lot of people on those videos that we just saw. I haven't met some of them. I joined a few years ago and I haven't met some of those people. So there's a variety of people constantly, challenging us to go beyond and to see more and to experience more and to think more.
That's a community. Yeah, for sure.
So one of the perks of doing this for as long as you have, I haven't listened to 500 episodes, but I've listened to you all consistently. And one of the things that's been fun is watching your tastes evolve. Also, Andrew's laughing because I was told him earlier tonight I was happy to hear that he's had a change of heart about seeing it at the Reen, which is my sort of like desert island movie too. But I'm just curious, like how do you feel like your tastes have evolved? How is the conversation been instrumental in that process?
I would say just because of what Michael mentioned, this is a project of continual curiosity, like constantly expanding our knowledge base of film. Your tastes naturally evolve just with exposure to other things. And honestly, in addition to Cinematary being a big, a way in which I've kind of like grown my own taste. Also, your program, the Public Cinema, Darren, was pretty big for me in kind of expanding my own taste for film. Folks who listen to the podcasts know that I'm a big champion of slow cinema. And I got exposed to a lot of stuff for the first time going to public cinema screenings. And I think if you go back to the first time I talk about a slow cinema movie on the podcast, it was a Pitch Bongworth Ethical's Uncle Boonmee, Who Can Recall His Past Lives. And I thought it was so boring. I really, really did not like it. And, just kind of like continually re-encountering stuff like that, those sort of acquired tastes eventually become acquired. And now that's like, one of my favorite subgenres of film.
I might embarrass myself a little. I used to be really afraid of David Cronenberg. I never touched any of his work. I looked at him and I'm like, you frighten me. You repel me.
That person?
His work. And what's inside that mind of his. And I was so frightened by him. And we did a series on him and I decided to be brave and dip my toe in. And then I dove in head first from there on. I was like, wow, the water is really fine here. These are my friends and, they're not going to let me fail. They're not going to, push me beyond what I can handle. But it really did give me the excuse and, the real, purpose to do that. Otherwise, I still probably would have never, to this day, would probably have never seen a David Cronenberg film. And Andrew and I, we saw The Shrouds at TIFF. So as like a huge, Cronenbergian, I guess. But that's just to speak to, how our tastes change and grow. We expose each other to, new art and, we get a feel for each other. We think, hey, you might really enjoy this. I think that this would be, very much a Grace film or very much a Michael film and you should check this out. And just trusting in the people around you, trusting in your community and the support system that, they'll guide you through it. And if you hate it, then that's all the more, reason to discuss and to share and learn.
I've not returned to Jackass, but I am actually genuinely curious. I would enjoy it more now. But I think when I think back to because I've been involved in some ways since 2017 or 2018, and when I think back over those years and watching movies, I think that my taste has just broadened, and I don't know, I have a lot more language to put on movies. I had seen, before being involved in Cinematary, I had seen movies that, I now recognize as, slow cinema, that I now have a lot more language, a lot more of the context to, understand what that is. And it's, deepened my appreciation of that, but also, broadened, once you know what a thing is, then you can kind of seek out more things like it. And, the same would go for, any number of, forms, documentary forms or avant-garde or something. There's an avant-garde series that we did once that again kind of having a series where you're able to kind of talk about those things and make connections is broadening, not just because you have seen something new, but it gives you a new framework to look at things. And I do feel like that is the case for me, is that a lot of the conversations have given me new frameworks for things, so I can have new ways to engage with them or new ways to find other things that are connected to it.
The key for me was to get really smart people on the podcast, because they're much smarter than I am, so they say much more eloquent things than I do. Early on, I think a lot of the stuff that Andrew and Nadine would talk about was very influential to me, because they were such good writers, and they were so smart, and they would come up with these kind of long long explanations for things, which, you know, in retrospect, like some of it was smart, some of it was just a little bit pontificating. But like they watched stuff that was like really challenging to me, you know. I would say much more kind things to like Marvel movies early on the podcast, and I'm not gonna give them a sniff of time like nowadays. And that's not because I like became so much smarter about movies. I'm like, oh, I'm better than these. It's just because I became more curious about different things. And a lot of that, well, not a lot of that, like all of it came from the podcast, because we were being challenged, but whether by ourselves or others, to like watch stuff that was completely out of your comfort zone. And that's just made me, whether I liked it or not, it's made me like a better film watcher, because I now know how to kind of lock in with that type of stuff. And again, like I may not like it, but I'm like much more open to it. It's made watching movies way more fun, because you find stuff that's just completely different than what you perceived as something that you would enjoy. I also like how, like along those same lines, like when someone was on the podcast, like if they were on enough, you would kind of you know, get like, okay, here's the thing they're gonna bring. Because if anyone's not listened to the podcast, like the format is usually part one is like, here's movies we've watched recently, and then part two is like on the film itself, so like Grand Budapest Hotel or whatever. And like there were certain people who would be on where you're like, man, I really want to know what they're gonna bring. Nadine honestly was one of those folks. Asked Seth would be like, so I watched this Bigfoot documentary on YouTube from 1969, and here's what I thought about that. And like he would always have something like that whenever he's been on. And I really like that, how like different people bring different perspectives that, like, again, like Zach said, like introduce you to new things or make you have new ways of thinking. But they also bring different energies. Like Logan, who was in the video. Logan, God love him, would come in and he would find something deeply emotional in his own life for any movie. And it would make some of the reviews, you're just like, okay, I don't think that this deep emotional connection that you found in Iron Man 3 really holds up. But you would also watch other movies and it's just, you know, it's the whole scene and out of from other people's perspectives. And he wrote such lovely reviews. There's one on the site of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, that he wrote, that still gets hits. Like people still read it. It's such a wonderful review. The Drive My Car one he referenced is the saying, people still read it. And having that, even though me, Zach, the film watcher, was kind of like, I don't watch movies necessarily that way. It was nice to have that, because nobody wants to listen to or watch a podcast. It's just me with like my type of perspective. Like that's boring. Even me in the podcast, I don't want to listen to that. And so that's why I love the people who were on that video, because they all brought something different.
I worry that what I'm about to say is not going to lead to a question, so let me just warn her. It's like I'm a big I'm just like I spend an hour in my car every day, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think that part of the charm of the format is, especially in unscripted podcasts like yours, there's an intimacy between the participants that like I get to listen in on. And when you're talking about, you know, like you look forward to hearing somebody's perspective on a film or something like that, or you feel your taste being pushed in a new direction because of the podcast. I think partly it's because the format itself, or even this is what we're doing right now. We're all improvising. We're kind of speaking and thinking out loud, which is like excruciating in some ways. It's embarrassing to have like the spontaneous thoughts being captured and transmitted sometimes.
With every like and record every full commentary.
Shall run.
No. But especially over time, it creates it inspires that kind of growth individually in us, and it becomes a conversation with your listeners. Like I said, I'm not leading for a very good question there. But I do wonder if that resonates with you all.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, there is kind of an intimacy that develops there. You're kind of getting a sense of how somebody else's brain works, how they
think about movies differently than you do, and what all psychologically may be informing that, you kind of like slowly uncover over time. And one thing that I've heard people say about film criticism that I think is very true is like, it doesn't matter if you agree with a given film critic. It matters that you understand what their perspective is and how their perspective aligns with and also differs from your own. And so you can kind of like recalibrate your expectations based on where they're at. So I think that we have all kind of like gotten that sense of where each other's perspectives are, and kind of in a way have a better sense of like how to engage with other film critics in the same way.
There's a longtime listener. He's probably driving in his car while he listens to this. Ron Hayes on Patreon, and he will talk about when I talk to him on the phone, he'll like recount the episode to me, and be kind of like, okay, so you talked this week about Grand Budapest Hotel. He always is like, all right, Andrew's going to talk about like the gender roles, and Zach, you're going to talk about this. And Michael's going to say like a bunch of times, they make a good point about something. And it's just, and it's kind of strange because he also like will watch it on his TV with like a glass of wine. It will watch our YouTube stream. That seems overly intimate from what you're describing. But also like, it's kind of like we're his friends in the room with him. And so when he talks about it, he's met Andrew once. He's never met Grace or Michael, but he like knows them because he listens to so many episodes.
And that's just the thing about podcasts in general. They are inherently kind of parasocial, right? You feel like you're friends with these people when you are not. Also, shout out to our listeners for not being weird about that. Nobody has ever done anything like creepy in a parasocial way, so I appreciate that.
If anything, they don't talk to us.
Yeah, they should talk to us more.
Yes.
They can talk to me more.
I was just going to say, I definitely feel like the intimacy, and I honestly don't listen to the podcast episodes that I'm on. Like, I'll listen to the other ones, but I find it like really difficult to listen to because it is hard to hear that like improvised thought process coming from me the second time around, because I'm critiquing myself or like feeling how I should be able to say something more articulately, or accidentally said something I didn't like mean because I like was off the cuff and speaking poorly. So I really appreciate, for instance, Zach, you coming through all the old episodes to hear like what you said, not just last week, but like 10 years ago. So,
I had the same thought while I'm on the podcast, like, oh, wow, I'm really not expressing myself articulately. I have all these thoughts in my head that I feel like I should be going to or should be wording in a better way. But then once I get some distance from it, if I go back and re-listen to the episode, I'm like, man, I was kind of cooking there a little bit. Because I'm not also hearing all the other unspoken thoughts in my head.
That was me through this whole series. I was just, man, Zach in 2014 was cooking. He's great.
It's a good segue for like something else I want to talk about, but just to put a button on that, I do think it's kind of great that at the same point, basically over the last decade, our attention spans have been crushed by the swine, But at the same time, we've also, the bargain is we also got podcasts, which is, I do think we all have this basic human craving for like meaningful conversation, something that's going to go at least a little bit below surface level. I know that's why I'm drawn to podcasts. But just like on the subject of the last 10 years, you all also happen to have existed during what is arguably the most transformative decade in cinema's history, going back 100 years, like between the move to streaming, COVID, when I moved here to Knoxville in 1998, there were probably a dozen movie theaters in Knox County. We're down to 5, I think 4 or 5.
Shout out to Central Cinema.
For sure. We didn't have this. And and it's also, I don't necessarily want to hear you all opine again on superhero movies, but like that's been the state of phase during the lifetime of Cinematary. You have been very attentive to the life of cinema for the last decade. Do you have any general thoughts about the transformation you've been watching, or Any thoughts about, are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic?
But just to toss this for y'all, I mean, I think we're pretty on the curve. We were doing like, we don't just review necessarily movies. We've also done, all different varieties of things. Whether it's like, we've done a music video series, the series on YouTube video essays. And so just kind of adding to that question, it's like, we also have been like pretty on the ball with just trying to explore stuff that kind of is cinema adjacent in today's world.
Also, to repeat something that I said to Darren at dinner, I remember in one of the earliest episodes of the podcast, Zach was sharing how hyped he was for the Lego movie to come out. And I remember me and the other host at the time, Dylan, being very skeptical of the idea that there could be a movie that's just like brand the movie and people would turn up to see that or that they should. And I think that in the short term, you were proven correct because the Lego movie kind of slaps. But also in the long term, I think that general trend of, the film industry just mining for IP has been really destructive, right?
I didn't rush out for a Minecraft movie though, so like I'm not figuring out as a person.
I think like the biggest thing that I felt like over the course of the last 10 years, which I haven't been involved like starting in 2014, but in 2014, like I was going to the movie theaters like a fair amount, but also like streaming had like blown so many doors open to movies that like I would never ever have had access to. And so for a while, like Netflix and Hulu at various points had like their Criterion collection on them. And like would like pick up festival movies that I had read reviews of and like stream them like within a few months of like the festival and stuff like that. And so for a while, like I remember being fairly optimistic about streaming as like a way to like give me, who always living in like the American South, like in places that don't have like an especially robust like film distribution. Like it felt like, wow, this is finally had access to like the same movies that the critics are talking about. And what I've seen over the past few years, I guess, is like venture capital money dried up and like the streaming, landscape became more focused on original content. And like people realize like there's not a sustainable business model here. Is that like that possibility of streaming as this kind of like utopian, like, giving people access to things is like almost entirely dried up unless you have access to like a few of them, like Canopy. I think the Criterion channel does like good work, but like, if you had asked me what I felt about Netflix in 2014, I would have been like, it gives me a lot of stuff to watch that I would have no access to otherwise. And if you ask me about Netflix now, it's like, there's a few things on it that I enjoy, but ultimately it's not like that same lifeline. And I don't know, that's the biggest change for me.
Well, not Netflix, but name almost any movie you'd want to see. You could probably rent it on Amazon, right? Many more movies than you could rent at Blockbuster back in the day. But the fact that it's on Amazon, biggest company in the world, or
Google, or Apple,
right, is just kind of in keeping with what we've seen happen with capitalism more broadly in this world.
Any thoughts, Grace?
I sort of struggle with how I feel. Like, I mean, to get back to the question, is it where you're asking us how we feel about the current landscape of film? Oh man, I feel like Miss America, and like I'm not super prepared for that question. It's huge. I think I feel pretty hopeful because I think that the future of film is at a more community level, like this sort of a podcast, this sort of a space, cinema clubs popping up left, right, and center. Chroma, shout out to Chroma, shout out to Central, shout out to Cinematary, shout out to the library.
Shout out to Check Out Cinema.
Shout out to Check Out Cinema, my new podcast. I think that the future of film, I think it's going back to sort of a more grassroots, a more in like a community space where people are realizing that it's cool and it's fun to connect with people, to go to a space, to sit quietly, to watch the same thing distraction free, and then to discuss that. I think that we're like largely missing community and communal spaces as a society. So I think that once we start to appreciate the, films at a communal level, then, it'll maybe instead of like, trickling down, maybe it'll start to trickle up. Then, there's independent features that get made and financed, and you make a movie with your friends over here, and then you put it in the local film festival there, and then that local film festival puts it towards the regional film festival, puts it towards the state film festival, puts it towards, and it just keeps getting in front of people, and it starts to snowball out of control. So I'm very hopeful sitting up here. Otherwise, if I wasn't hopeful, I don't think that I would be a part of this.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's great. I would also point to public cinema as well. Like going to public cinema was another one of those like kind of communal things. At the same time, at the risk of seeming like Ray Fiennes' character, like I have like such a deep nostalgia for like the traditional like movie theaters, and in particular multiplexes, which I know that like where I may be like a generation older, multiplexes would have felt like the bad new thing. But like I used to work at like a movie theater, did so for several years. Like when I've been going my whole life, and like the communal aspect is great, and like that's obviously what always has to be at the core. But like it is a major bummer to me, like that kind of like headline studio like theatrical distribution does seem to. It seems like it's going, if not going extinct, it's going toward like, we're just, the only things will be Minecraft movies and that sort of thing.
A thing that I read about the current state of cinema a while back that has really stuck with me, and I quote it on the podcast all the time, so sorry for me to say this a million times, but it's in Nick Pinkerton's book about Goodbye Dragon Inn, the great movie by Simon Wang. He's quoting another critic, I forget who he's quoting, but he talks about how he believes that cinema is not dying, but becoming marginalized, meaning that it's kind of occupying the same place that like poetry does now. There's still poetry being written. There's still plenty of people like talking about poetry, but you kind of have to go seek it out. It's not monoculture in the way that it maybe once was, right? And so, yeah, I think that what Rach is talking about film being a thing that exists on kind of a grassroots level in smaller communities, and in spaces where people who are in the know have to go seek it out. That seems to be where we're headed.
Richard Brody like does a year-end list for the New Yorker every year, which I always find really interesting because he's like he's got takes. But one of his consistent takes is to be like the contrarian about cinema dying, with that like very point that you guys are making, which is that like cinema is not dying, like the theatrical model of distribution is dying, but like cinema at the moment, like, and granted, like living in New York and being able to see all this stuff that like I think maybe gives you a different perspective, but like the way that like digital film and like, the ease of like recording things has like created this explosion of like types of like video content that like, maybe are movies or maybe aren't. Like he's made that point several times that like there is like in a lot of ways a lot of richness and diversity in film that there never has been in the past. But if you're not like really tied to that, multiplex, like, popcorn and, sitting in the theater model.
Yeah, I think Grace made a great point. Like, I think it'll definitely survive. Cassette tapes are coming back, y'all. I don't know if you knew that. I just learned that recently by Andrew's new album. Yeah, thanks. And so if cassette tapes can make a comeback, movies are doing fine. I think it will survive in like community spaces like this. I live in Charlotte, and back there's a movie theater called the Independent Picture House. It's very same vibe as Central Cinema, where it's a lot of like retrospectives. It's series of movies that you may not have access to, or stuff like they're also doing a David Lynch series where you get to see this on the big screen, and just kind of celebrate that. I'll pivot the question a little bit though and say, I'm less worried about the future of movies. I am somewhat concerned about the future of cinematic language. I don't dislike a lot of the stuff in the multiplex because it's inherently bad or it's whatever. It's just there's just a blandness to it. It's losing a lot of We were sitting in here at the very beginning of this, and they're playing the clip from The Great Dictator of Chaplin, playing with the the balloon of the world. And it's simple, but it's classic, but it has just this wonderful, like that's a timeless joke, that's a timeless gag. not saying we got to like have Chaplin movies again, but like I do think that we just in general, whether it's just any tech, like we were losing a lot of that cinematic language. I'm glad that we watched the Wes Anderson movie, because while he may seem overwhelming to a lot of people, they're like, I don't have time for his confectionery. He does, like we talked a little bit about the jump scare with the head. That's all movie magic. Like that's just editing. And I hope I'm more concerned about that, where the movies will continue to have movies, but they might become much less interesting than not having movies at all, because we'll have movies.
It is interesting. I feel like it's kind of like become like almost like a kind of joke, like trope on Letterboxd or wherever. You just pick some like random ass like 90s movie that like wasn't especially well regarded at the time, but like then comment on like how much more competent the lighting and like the framings of the shots and all seem compared to like just random schlock from like right now. And I mean, time always like recontextualizes movies in ways that are interesting and new, and I'm sure maybe now there'll be interesting recontextualizations of stuff we don't understand now. But like just the kind of basic technical components, like if you go back and look at like movies that were shot in film and like shot in a certain time period, like the striking like feature of that is like the dynamics of that compared to now.
Do you think people will one day be nostalgic for the flatness of the Netflix original movie?
There's already like if you look at something like We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is using like a kind of like flatness of the digital affect in like a really artistic way. Like I do think there's genuinely like something there, in the same way that people have recontextualized like VHS aesthetics, or like you had the like mini DV like stuff like in the like early millennium, and like I think there's always like, for whatever format that there is, people will find the limitations of that and find what's interesting about the limitations of that. So maybe
you've said about 27 things that I want to respond to. I'm trying to prioritize. First of all, I'll just say, when we started, some of you have heard this story before, but when we started the public cinema, we called it that in part because we saw the writing on the wall. My partner in that is Paul Harrell's local filmmaker. He had just made his first feature film, had just gone through the process of trying to fund budgeting for that, to get to your point, Zach, major filmmakers are now shooting for 21 days instead of 48 days. So they just don't have time or budget to do that kind of stuff. But to finish my thought, we called it the public cinema partly because we see cinema as moving toward the kind of art form that is going to need some kind of public-private partnerships to sustain exhibition. So like in the same way, I would say the same way that Knoxville has a free public museum of art, we have a great orchestra, we have multiple opera companies, we have public sculptures, we have dance companies, but none of those are existing off of ticket sales. They're getting public dollars, they're getting private philanthropy. And I do think there's a kind of cinema exhibition. I think eventually there will be 3 Regal theaters in Knox County in this rural place. And then everything else we're just going to have to figure out how to show. I don't know what we're doing with time, but as a fan, I'm genuinely curious about, you mentioned in your Knoxville Sentinel did a nice article on you all this week. You mentioned that you have plans for a different vision of Cinematary going forward. I am curious, whatever you're willing to say about that.
All right. We're keeping it under wraps. We definitely didn't just kind of like develop it a little bit last night while having beers. No, I was saying before the screening, the format that we do now, where it's movies we saw this week into a movie that we do in the second half, I can do that. Like I can do, at least me personally, I can do that in my sleep at this point. Like I know how to do it. It works. People like it. Example, here, it works. People like it, but, I think 500 seemed like a nice round number. It seemed like a good stopping point for that, because at least for me, like we talked about it in the New Sentinel article, there was so many series, a couple years ago that brought in a lot of like, guests and scholars and like people speaking, and we had themes and topics. One of the ones I love was Truth and Fiction in the South, where we showed a narrative film about this moment, and then a documentary about the moment. And so you kind of looked at how it was handled narratively, and then how it was handled in the documentary. And I love that because it was exploring this theme that was kind of very meaningful to us, coming from the South and seeing these. It came out of not seeing depictions of the South that were ultra flattering in narrative films, and kind of like pushed off. And so the next plans are to kind of return to that, do it less where we're doing it bi-weekly, like we'll take long breaks, but we might come back and be like, hey, we're doing this series on this topic or this theme or this filmmaker or whatever, and it might be 4 episodes and it'll be 4 weeks straight, or it might be 6 episodes and be 6 weeks straight. Like, we don't know, with more production, more kind of trying to get more people involved, and just do something a little bit different. I think we're all like super creative people, and we can't be the Rolling Stones. We got to kind of like go into a new band at some point.
Zach has often cited the podcast You Must Remember This by Karina Longworth as like a model of what we kind of want to go towards, where we'll go away for a while, we'll do a bunch of research, come back a couple months later, and just like throw a bunch of episodes at you that are a little bit more high effort, a little bit more high quality. We're also planning on taking the movies we saw this week format and turning that into a Patreon show called Movies We Saw This Month. So less frequent, but still you can get our takes on the current cinema if people want to subscribe to the Patreon.
Which is only like $1. There's like a $5 option. There's a $1 option. We always joke that you can do like a $10,000 option. Like it's kind of like, it's $1 a month. Like, you just put your card on it. You're going to forget about it. And then we'll come back and we can probably still do like some Patreon picks occasionally, and like do a nice little episode. Just a side note, I love our Patreon picks because these people give us money monthly to support the podcast. And then we, every so often, we go, hey, like, give us a movie that, maybe you like or something, or, you don't like us, you're going to give us a bad movie. And like, we'll watch it, review it. And a lot of times people would be genuine and like be like, I really like this movie, you should watch this. And then we would just completely shit on it. And we would just rail on it, and we'd be like, this is awful, this part's awful, who likes this character? And they still gave us money. So, I think that's a nice trait for this podcast, is we won't sugarcoat you. Like, you'll give us money and then we'll shit on your favorite movie.
The best part was when one of Andrew's students became a patron to get us to watch Romeo and Juliet, which it was a good episode.
It's a good episode. They wrote an essay about the movie that they read partially on the show. Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like to say about your time?
So I want to talk a little bit about, and Darren, we've seen you here as we started going to the Toronto International Film Festival, and that's become such a massive, honestly, like, we don't make, like I said, we don't make any money. We just make the small Patreon, the people who we show on their films about. And so we don't make a lot of money out of this, but we do get to go, I've been going for about 6-7 years under a press accreditation. Andrew followed a couple years later, and then Grace joined us this past year. We had to go up to Toronto. It's become very much like a pilgrimage, and get to just get in sucked up into this world where there's just all these new movies. There's all these foreign films that like you're never going to get a chance to see because it's so niche. And just like being in that environment has become something that like we kind of have to do every year. And that's been something that's been massive for the podcast.
Yeah, that was, I'd said earlier, I was talking to some other folks, that was my first time leaving the country. And I didn't have a passport before this, and it's pretty something like this is so impactful, just the way that it's absolutely changed my life for the better now. Now I can say I'm a world traveler, but how many people are as fortunate as we are to travel the world on our passions? And our French is minimal, but we speak the same visual language, so
Well, I met you when you got off the plane because she's like, I've never been out of the country. So I'm like, hey, I got you. Like, we'll meet. We'll get to Toronto safely. Like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I'm teaching a class this semester at UT on film criticism and film festivals. And I use you all as an example. We're wrapping up the semester, and my students, I've got several students, like if you guys were still posting reviews and stuff, I had a couple I would set in your direction. But I used you all as an example of like one of the other silver linings in just the changing film industry and the changing technology is you all spun up a podcast and a website, and that's really all it takes, especially in Toronto.
They'll kind of let anybody in. I gotta do
It's really exclusive. Thank you, Toronto, for listening.
They're sort of a quantity over quality, not throwing any shade here because they's okay.
We got rejected from the New York Film Festival. We got rejected from a couple other ones, so it's fine. We understand.
Yeah. No, but I just want to commend you all, and also for any listeners, like there is a model to follow here. If you have an interest in film criticism, or I always think of festivals as like film summer camp, where you're just getting together in a completely different environment. You don't sleep enough. You spend all day watching movies and eating and drinking with friends that talks about us. It's the best. It's the best. If you want to experience that in person, November 6th and then Film Festival. Quick plug. But yeah, I really do commend you guys for the commitments to the project and the good work you've done. It's been fun to watch.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah. Job. Anything else to say?
I want to give a shout out to everybody who's contributed to Cinematary over the years. I know it's the four of us up here, and there was also, 5 or 6 people we heard from in the video, but there are also so many more people that we did not have videos from, and this whole project would not exist without the communal effort of all those people.
We were going back into episodes, and I kept going like, Andrew, who is this person? And he was on like 6 episodes. I'm like, I don't remember that man. I was like Kiki Palmer. I was like, I don't remember that man. I'm sorry I knew that.
Nothing.
Yeah. Grace.
Oh.
Michael. Nothing. Oh, okay. I'm just trying to be a good host. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the yes, it's just great. Yeah. Big thank you for coming to this. We always appreciate it. I know it's 11:30. Y'all want to go to bed. I want to go to bed. But we also appreciate it. If you have any, we'll hang around if y'all want to, talk or anything like that. But thank you so much. We really love this. I love this. I don't know what I'm going to do when we don't have a bi-weekly podcast for a while. Like, I don't know when the next series will start, but I'm going to be kind of like weird because of this. I've been doing this on a weekly to bi-weekly basis for 11 years now. And it's going to be very weird when I don't have to like stop and edit a podcast and do that stuff. But, it also has been a pleasure. These are people who I adore. Andrew's one of my best friends. So we're going to find ways to keep talking because, at the end of the day, us hanging out is really, that's pretty much the podcast. We don't really, nothing else really matters. So thank you.
What's the thing now?